Welcome, everyone. My name is Ryan Halliday, and today we're going to be talking about the art of the possible with Hyperion Planning.
Now, a few things on flow as well. So we'll get into introductions here in a second. We've got a good kind of real life client example and then some other more anonymous type use cases as well. So that'll be kind of the flow today. And we'll also kind of kick it over to Eric Petzel for kind of the Oracle introduction. You may need to give him voice, Marissa.
Hi, folks. Appreciate your time today. My name is Eric Petzel. I'm a director at Oracle with our Applications Unlimited organization, which is the account management group that covers our on-premise applications customers. And I have responsibility for a team here that covers our folks in retail, both across the US and Canada. And we appreciate you guys' time today and joining. The idea for this is to basically, we have a lot of customers, Hyperion customers, that are interested in planning, both looking at adding it to their Hyperion footprint and also maximizing their current utilization of that. So we thought customers would see some value in digging into planning a bit more. So partner with eCapital, who has an excellent Hyperion practice. So again, we appreciate your time today, and I'll turn it back over to eCap and Eric. Thank you.
Great. Well, let's do some introductions on our side. Eric, you want to introduce yourself here?
Sure. Thanks, Ryan, and thanks, Eric. So also thanks to all our attendees for joining this afternoon. It's a pleasure to host today. My name is Eric Milbrandt, Senior Director, EPM and Advisory at eCapital. Came up writing code in Hyperion. I've been here for 10 years. Prior to that, I was in business banking and supply chain, EDI or ERP, supply chain document integration. I kind of oversee our Oracle practice as well as a few other key areas, and really helping in that FP&A, close consolidation reporting, data visualization, and kind of analytics space. Anything from leading projects and programs to, unboxing and unlocking and documenting process, getting into advisory and some of the people process side of that technology piece. So, Ryan?
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Yeah, my name is Ryan Halliday. As I mentioned, I'm a manager on the EPM and finance advisory team here at eCapital. I personally have over 9 years of experience in various FP&A and EPM related roles. Similar to Eric, I have some experience in manufacturing and banking in a prior life, and much of that was at various Fortune 500 companies. Maybe if we transition into a little background into eCapital. So, as a company here, we have over 20 years of experience in performance management, data science, and analytics. As we talked about today, or as we will talk about today, we're going to be focusing more on the performance management portion with Hyperion Planning. So let's dive into this. We want to kick this off by giving you a client use case and some background into one of our kind of long-term clients here with ICU Medical. So some additional background into ICU Medical. They are a global medical technology company. They specialize in the development, manufacturing, and sale of innovative medical devices, critical care products, and these are primarily used in intensive care units. So this company provides a wide range of products really aimed at improving the safety of healthcare. And ICU Medical, over the years, they've made a number of acquisitions, one of which being Smiths Medical in early 2022. So we here at eCapital have been partnered with Smiths Medical for 6+ years at this point. So when we were first introduced to Smiths Medical and ICU Medical, they faced a number of challenges and really had a need for change. So really prior to our partnership with them, the client faced a number of challenges with their financial processes. So they suffered from disassociated Hyperion cubes. They had a number of pre-existing cubes that weren't really synced together. They had slow run times between data feeds, between all these existing applications. And really this created for a lack of integrated data, made it very difficult for the end users, the accounting and finance teams, to consume the data and validate the data and have that trust in their financials. So as part of our work at eCapital to address these issues and address these challenges, we really took a purpose-built philosophy and approach and started from the ground up when looking at their current Hyperion footprint and thinking about what we wanted to do in the future. So we implemented multiple planning cubes with, each with a specific purpose that we'll go into a little bit more detail here on. And by leveraging really again, getting back to the purpose-built philosophy, by leveraging a single chart of accounts, we were able to properly design all of their financial and operational models. And this was really done by concatenating and removing dimensions where possible to help increase that performance time and increase the user trust with the applications. So by using a uniform approach, it reduced the complexity, sped up those load times, and reduced the ultimate end user questions. So let's take a deeper look in that. So building off the last slide, we talked about the opportunity to, when looking at an overall environment and looking at all the different dimensions that are available in a source system and bringing those to a planning environment, we really saw here an opportunity to combine a few dimensions that previously existed into one single dimension. So this specific client was using Oracle EBS as a source system. They had division, currency, and division, company, and site as separate dimensions. And from a planning perspective, to increase the performance of their forecast and budgeting process, we saw an opportunity to combine those into a single dimension we called DivCom in this case, and use that dimension throughout all of their planning applications to help create that synchronized approach. So this slide shows a little bit more detailed into how we use common dimensions throughout multiple cubes in order to be able to consistently track through all of them and increase data integrity. So as we can see, the DivCom dimension here in all of these different cubes is listed throughout. So from an end user perspective, that is a kind of single point, single dimension that they can retrieve off of and use in all of their different cubes. And in terms of this, and I think this is something we'll get into a little bit more in the next slide here, but again, multiple cubes, and as we kind of move towards the right here, from like a workforce cube to expenses to income statement, that data is kind of consolidated and viewed at a higher level throughout. So let's talk about that in a little bit more detail here. So ultimately, this is their current Hyperion footprint post our partnership with them. So the purpose of this is to show that overall footprint, and at a high level, if we think about it here, their their data is sourced from EBS and fed into these planning applications. So first, let's take a look at maybe the bottom here. The bottom box is a workforce application. This is for management reporting, and the purpose of a workforce application is to do that employee level budgeting, forecasting, and headcount reporting. So for this specific planning cube, we were able to take a HR employee extract, load that into the system, leveraging their on-premise FDMEE, and we're able to calculate employee-related expenses at the individual driver level for their budgeting and forecasting. So, again, showing how these cubes relate, from their workforce cube that has all of their employee level budgeting and forecasting information. We use that information or that data to feed into their expenses cube. So the expenses cube is, again, a separate cube that contains all of their detailed expense data. So this is where you can get your full list of expenses, right down to the GL level. And this really, this was built to allow for functional level reporting as well. So in terms of like how this client specifically uses it from like an end user perspective, they're primarily inputting, like most of the inputs are primarily within this cube. And then that data, the expenses data, is fed into an income statement cube on the far right of our screen. So an income statement cube, in this case, is really the summarized management reporting view of the entire income statement. And, we have automated processes to, like I said, transfer forecast and budget data between the expenses cube into there. And this is an even more consolidated level than an expenses cube, where their account hierarchy is really a combination of a function and account to really give us that fully allocated P&L. And then moving on to their balance sheet and cash flow. So this is where, any sort of balance sheet reporting or cash flow reporting at the management level or management reporting level would be completed out of. This, again, summarized data, consolidated view, and by leveraging those common dimensions, we're able to tie data between all 4 of these management reporting cubes that I've talked about. So looking elsewhere in their footprint, they also have a sales and cost of sales cube. So this is used for product level reporting, for sales volumes. You're able to do rate volume mix analysis, and it really ultimately helps the client link different budgets together, like their product budget and manufacturing budget. And again, using a kind of centralized chart of account approach, we're able to even load summarized data from this sales cost of sales cube into their income statement. And then they also have an additional cube that I'll cover is, it's called Lytics. It's really just an analytics cube that's used to mirror their ERP. So as we know, ERPs are, very good at storing data, but not necessarily very good at reporting data in all times or in all instances. So this is really used as like that validation middle ground in this case to retrieve ERP data and have a reference point for Hyperion Planning users to see what's in the ERP and reference it against all the different cubes that we talked about. And with that, I'll pass it over to Eric.
Thanks, Ryan. And everyone, feel free to use that Q&A or raise your hand, and we can kind of disposition and answer any questions as they may come up. But kind of transitioning to just the quick Oracle direction for on-prem, right? There's a lot of kind of fuss, in the industry right now, whether it be Hyperion or other tools to push folks to the cloud. And obviously the cloud has some great benefits that come with it, but there are increased costs as well, right? And so just want to make sure that everybody's aware, right, that Oracle Hyperion support is extended and intended to cover all the way through at least 2033. So that's at least for 10 more years. And I do expect, in my heart of hearts, that will be extended at some point past that day as well, although I cannot speak for Oracle. So again, I think just to summarize, the Hyperion, Essbase, et cetera, tool set has been around for a long time. It's going to continue to be around, and there's certainly no plans for that support to be decommissioned or, sunset anytime soon. Now to get into just a few additional use cases to kind of get those creative thoughts flowing for people. So obviously there's the core financials box for Hyperion, right? Core FP&A, CP&A, CFO office activities. Of course, your P&L, your income statement, operational expenses, balance sheet, cash flow, and then kind of some of the other peripheral financial use cases, right? So workforce planning by head, very popular right now with just all of the uncertainty and things across the footprints, right? As well as CapEx planning with depreciation as an output. So kind of that fixed assets component, right? Now, there are, of course, many use cases within all of those financial sets, right? And there's also kind of thinking outside of that box, a ton of what we call XP&A, right? Or operational extended FP&A use cases, where we're continuing to see FP&A be kind of partnered with operations and other functions like supply chain, et cetera, throughout the organization and enterprise in order to drive, right, that true business value from a finance business partner standpoint. And so, that traditional thought of planning being a finance or numbers only tool is not necessarily how it has evolved and kind of sits in the enterprise today. So said another way, we can plan very granular, not necessarily financial statement type data sets, and then roll that up into how they affect financials from an analytical standpoint. And we'll get into some of those use cases here. Incredibly flexible tool, right? It makes you feel like you maybe have 6 arms sometimes. So really flexible inputs, right, to really kind of multitask, right? So getting the enterprise obviously out of Excel, but then also essentially allowing everyone to do anything they can think of, right? Which can be a blessing and a curse. So core financial is very simple, right? You have a chart of accounts, an account hierarchy, very easy to get to that 7 to 9 dimension magic number. When we talk operational use cases, though, things like raw material planning or procurement analytics, or even looking at potential for sub-ledger type, working capital or fixed asset activities, that can be and is quite a bit more cumbersome from a data standpoint. And that's where thoughtful design and kind of adherence to best practice, right, becomes really important as we build these operational models. Kind of like Ryan touched on earlier in the ICU Medical example, a best-in-class enterprise performance management or EPM footprint really starts with well thought out ETL through what we like to call a holistic metadata strategy. So getting into some of these examples, right? So one of these is a global provider of chemical and equipment services and products, spanning 100 countries with over 50 business units, over 500 plants and warehouses globally through the supply chain function, as well as greater than 30 ERPs from a consolidation and reporting standpoint. What does this all mean for supply chain, right? It leads to an excess of 100,000 raw material SKUs. And similar or same SKUs may differ in classification due to differing ERP systems, right? So that's kind of a master data governance challenge as well. Supply chain finance had relied on manual templates in order to kind of tie these movements to the P&L from a material costing and finished goods standpoint. What did this mean for this particular client, right? There was a lack of meaningful insights, right, as it applied to the P&L, even though these weren't technically, full P&L models, just from a supply chain procurement standpoint. Really looking at regional sourcing teams living in Excel only, not a real centralized hub for, that single source of truth, right? Kind of some of the old pains, right? Things that prior to CPM, right, being implemented in finance, were going on, same stuff, right? Offline template gathering, couldn't really do ad hoc analysis in meetings, right? So asking questions and hearing the sort of, I don't know, let me get back with our regional supply chain teams. really lacking that common basis of information, right? So the solution was, as I'm sure you can all guess, a Hyperion Planning application, really delivering that single integrated solution for that global raw material analysis, right, at each individual business line or division. This leveraged a centralized data warehouse for kind of spend and volume information, and leveraged that master data for material classification to help clean up the differing codes across different ERPs. So more on that, right? Increasing cost savings, right? Ownership of data, really helping sourcing and procurement do their core job function, right? Which is to kind of manage and normalize overall spend on certain items across the entire organization, right? So think about, having 150,000 SKUs leading to thousands of finished goods, right? And you can kind of assign each finished good a percentage, right, of a SKU or a raw material. This kind of operational or analytics use case that we were able to put into on-prem Hyperion Planning really allows the business to assign those raw material percentages to finished goods and see which finished goods, right, are costing more as a basis of their kind of makeup of the raw materials that they're comprised of. This allows sourcing to go back to vendors that are potentially overcharging, right, and either negotiate better rates or potentially move pieces of those contracts to other vendors with more favorable pricing, right? All of this is then kind of rolled up and looked at on a regular basis, really to, again, drive overall core financial P&L impacts, right? But sitting within operational supply chain finance, right? Delivering that kind of, again, procurement sourcing type savings without being part of the core FP&A activities. So a little bit of a cool kind of outside the box use case that I think is helpful for folks that own planning to get a glimpse into. Another example is a device manufacturer with an income statement including around 1,000 products. Again, very similar to the raw material. This is made up of tens of thousands of different SKUs. And so, right, performing OpEx or income statement planning at this level just wouldn't be reasonable. But what this does is it gives the ability for this client to look down at the entire product hierarchy down to individual plastic resins, right, and individual components, and really help say, hey, what's my demand forecast, right? How many units, et cetera, are we forecasting at a demand level? And then is that realistic, right, based on the components at the SKU level that make that up? And instead of going back to, maybe a demand or supply chain planning tool or a data warehouse or offline spreadsheets, this entire process can kind of be handled reverse engineer within Hyperion Planning, right? So looking at that FP&A, again, sales forecast, bumping that up against the demand plan and seeing at which levels each of these SKUs will be, needed to be sourced. This can also help with working capital, of course, right? Keeping stock turns and inventory at the right levels to produce the goods without, right, renting or owning extra warehouse space, as well as the opposite of that, right, preventing stockouts or the inability to service orders at a timely pace as well. So again, another sales SKU type analytical demand model, P&L and business working capital impacts, sure, absolutely, but not necessarily that kind of core financial use case that folks might think of when they think of, CPM or any of the EPM tools on the market, right? So why is this impactful, right? Legacy data warehouse tools can take 12 or 14 hours to refresh, right? When we talk about Subledger and analytics and ERP, those are not, click and wait a few seconds or even a minute for an answer. Oftentimes we are, letting IT run some kind of data analysis where we're going for a water cooler chat or grabbing a cup of coffee, right? And so I think, again, it can be interesting to understand, right, with thoughtful design, how can we kind of remove some of these barriers to being that finance business partner for other functions, right? Sales, operations, sourcing, procurement, right? Another example of that sales model is really getting to, right, kind of that gold standard of sales and product management, right? That rate volume mix, right? So in real time saying, right, are my favorable or unfavorable P&L or sales impacts, right, due to price, volume or mix changes, right? So again, something that's very common, very normal to a sales or a sales finance leader, but not necessarily something we see implemented in Hyperion or other CPM tools often enough, right? So again, in summary, right, data is not easily reconcilable. It's impossible to budget or forecast properly with old setups, too many dimensions, legacy tools. This solution includes GL accounts, right, mapping to kind of automate that reconciliation process between the data warehouse and the GL, and really provides that automated forecast at an item level, really changing the forecast process to be more statistical and exception based. What does that mean? We're not doing things by a gut feeling, right? Or just simple trend line. We're actually looking at all of these lenses, right? Rate, volume, mix, favorable, unfavorable impacts, and getting down to, again, what does that demand plan versus the business plan at a product level mean at the SKU level, right? For that end-to-end kind of supply chain sales management loop. Some other examples, right? Think capacity planning, supply chain efficiency, sales campaign results, right? Marketing, promotion, trade. What are my marketing dollars or promotion spend ultimately yielding me in terms of either increased customer engagement, increased customer spend across product lines, or things like that, right? Category product management, very complex allocations, right? Which products should I ship to sell to which stores at a better price or profit margin? I think really the sky is ultimately the limit, right? And so I think it's just good, right? Like we all get stuck in our core financial use cases because that's what we have to do in FP&A, right? But I think as we move more again towards this trend we're seeing, right, an FP&A operational finance business partnership, the Chat GPT era is upon us, right? So artificial intelligence, machine learning is becoming more and more top of mind. We're going to continue to kind of bleed across the organization, right, and be asked to help out with some of these things. And we'd love to chat on any other interesting use cases, right, or things that may come up, as we're always looking for other stories, as I think the sky really is the limit with Hyperion Planning. Just some quick best practices to summarize. So, validate requirements relentlessly, right? So scope, timeline, budget's obviously the tenet of any project, and managing those successfully makes or breaks any project effort, right? So what does that mean? I think legacy projects and project management may capture requirements and kind of go off into what might seem like a cave for weeks or even months at a time, which is great, right? It's very efficient. A lot of development can get done. But what happens is when you come back to the business, the development team is maybe cycled on things for weeks that aren't necessarily value adds, right? So moving more to kind of that agile waterfall approach of, yeah, let's close the book before we move on, but let's also iterate quickly, right? And say, hey, is this prototype what you were thinking? Preventing that rework, preventing scope creep, having those weekly discussions on scope, timeline, and budget, right? Those prevent surprises that can be costly in terms of internal time, external time, and ultimately dollars, right? Think about a purpose-built philosophy when building Hyperion, as well as really CPM as a whole, right? Getting to that magic number of 7 to 9 dimensions. With Essbase 21C and some of the new planning features in the latest 11.2 releases, we are starting to see dimension counts of 10 or 11, maybe more if they're small enough, think tens or hundreds, not thousands of members, beginning to work seamlessly right now. These are a little more nuanced efforts, and mistakes are even more dangerous there. But some of the hybrid type activities and hybrid technology we're seeing in 21C is very exciting. So, if folks have some of those 9, 10, 11 dimension cubes that aren't performing well, rest assured that there's help out there on the on-prem 21C landscape. So always here to discuss those things if they do come up, right? But also really back to kind of a project sense, right? It's very important to determine key reporting and budgeting activities. and really design level of detail at the specific role-based activity. So what does that mean, right? Going back to an earlier example, is not building 26,000 SKUs within a corporate consolidated P&L like Ryan alluded to earlier, right? So knowing how and when to split data and application sizes across different use cases, right? So sales versus OpEx versus workforce versus a consolidated P&L, right? Do a thing and do it well, and then have natural holistic data flow that pulls everything together very intuitively. Great segue into the next topic, which really is that holistic metadata, right? So really properly designing all models, whether they be financial or operational, around one chart is really the easy and only good way to integrate. This reduces complexity and data transfer between, sources and targets, whether it be cubes or data visualization tools downstream, ERPs upstream, right? That ETL or extract, transform, load activity, that burden is reduced, which is a key kind of success criteria for a project like this, right? Creating those intuitive models where I can say, hey, here's my sales accounts and my 1,000 products, right, for a P&L, and then moving to a sales cube where I can drill down to thousands or hundreds of thousands of SKUs by each product, right, seamlessly. Moving to a different database, a different application, right, but it doesn't feel that way because everything's really been held consistent throughout the models, right? Really getting to that kind of top of the mountain ideal state where lower levels speak an operational or functional departments language, right? All kind of rolling up to that higher level FP&A financials language. And when you can get there, it's not always perfect, but I think 80-90% is really what's driving a lot of favorable financial impact across these tools at the org, right? Finance is actually being looked to provide guidance on, right, what operations should do this week, this month to positively affect the business based on current trends. And again, just modularization, purpose-built design philosophy, right? Getting things, and this is very technical, so I apologize if some of the folks aren't open for the more technical. I'll try not to go too deep on this webinar, but it's essentially a performance concern, these concepts we're talking about, right? So as we move into more detail and things become more specific, we run into kind of use cases for moving data and data activities to specific or single set models, really to maintain that performance, right? Calculations, aggregations, data gymnastics running in seconds or a minute or two in the worst case for big calculation loads. Really trying to get away from, hourly or nightly processes that take hours. That's not really the gold standard in 2023. And then it keeps everything else simpler as well, right? So forms, calculations, all of that, when you're not having dimensions that aren't relevant to certain use cases, force selections and drop downs, user confusion, adoption issues, things of that nature, right? So that purpose-built philosophy really helps with those things as well. Again, I can't say it enough. In 2023 with Essbase 21C really powering a lot of the planning footprint, hybrid Essbase is worth testing for any current performance concerns or really for any past use cases, right, that were deemed not to be worth building or attempting in Hyperion. And then again, right, if possible, tying that granular operational data back to financials is key as we move more into that XP&A or operational FP&A environment. How, again, in summary, holistic approach to metadata, really starting with a single chart of accounts and asking how are we going to tie back to financials? Do we need to? Are we going to be asked to tie back to financials? Because not every model does, right? Making use of alternate hierarchies. So think gap versus management or legal versus geographic hierarchies from a business unit standpoint, right? And then again, that dynamic ETL, right? Being ready to account for operational and really financial modeling changes, right? How do we build these very, very extremely complex models while also minimizing maintenance, right? Not running into code changes or logic changes, things like that. So that's really it for this afternoon. Thanks for joining, everyone. We'll stick around if there's any Q&A for a few minutes. And I think it's just really great, right, to kind of refresh and discuss, again, kind of the art of the possible in Hyperion, not only in finance for the core financials, but as well as the other operational and less commonly thought out use cases, right? Because there is a lot of horsepower still behind Essbase and Hyperion Planning as a whole in a product set